Over the past 2 years, we've been gathering here regularly for MTF press conferences. The pandemic is not over, but now we have to tackle yet another major challenge involving the economy and inflation. So today's conference is not about MTF work. Instead, my colleagues and I will provide an update on the economic and inflation outlook, and we will share details about the package of additional measures to help Singaporeans, especially the lower income groups and the more vulnerable segments in our society. We had anticipated the rise in prices at the start of this year, and that's why we responded with a comprehensive set of measures in the budget to cushion the impact on Singaporeans. And in April, we brought forward some of the budget measures, including the disbursement of the CDC vouchers and the Small Business Recovery Grant. There are still other measures being rolled out in the coming months, for example, Service and Conservancy charges and USAVE rebates. But since then, the global growth and inflation environment have proved to be more challenging. The Ukraine war has put tremendous stresses on global supply chains, and protectionist measures by countries have compounded supply chain disruptions. Global energy and food prices have risen sharply, and we must expect global inflation to broaden to other areas and even to pick up further before it stabilizes and gets better. Compared to other countries, Singapore is in a stronger position to deal with these economic challenges. Nevertheless, as a small and open economy, we have not been spared from the effects of higher prices. And indeed, over the last few months, we've seen prices going up steadily, especially for energy and food. The inflation situation will eventually stabilize, both globally and within Singapore. But for now, we must expect price increases to continue in the coming months. And in particular, energy prices are likely to remain elevated for the rest of the year. And this is why I've decided to introduce a new $1.5 billion support package to provide immediate and targeted relief for Singaporeans. The support measures in this package are tilted towards helping our lower income and vulnerable groups because they are the ones who are disproportionately impacted by the effects of inflation. So let me go through the key items in this package. First, we will permanently strengthen support for households that are most in need. In particular, I will enhance the ComCare short to medium-term assistance and long-term assistance rates. The Singapore allowance and monthly pension ceiling for pensioners who draw lower pensions will also be enhanced in tandem. So these enhancements to the rates will help them with the higher cost of living on a permanent basis. Second, I will extend a one-off GST voucher cash or GSTV cash special payment of up to $300 in August. This will benefit about 1.5 lower income to middle income workers as well as retirees without income. So altogether about 1.5 million Singaporeans. And this is over and above the enhancement to GSTV cash I announced in the budget, which means taken together, GSTV cash recipients will receive up to $700 in August this year. Third, we will continue to look out for lower income and vulnerable workers during this difficult period. One way is to ensure that employers continue to hire and pay lower wage workers higher wages, better wages, as part of our progressive wage model. And to give this a further push, I will enhance a progressive wage credit scheme this year so that the government takes on a larger proportion of the wage increases. And this enhancement will also help to reduce the cost burden for employers. I will also extend a jobs growth incentive to sustain support for employers that hire more vulnerable workers. And this extension will be for 6 months from October this year to March 2023. SMSG will share more details later, in particular about the parameters of the progressive wage credit scheme. Fourth, we will continue to help Singaporean households with the sharp rise in utilities bills. In the budget, I've already provided a fair amount of U-Save rebates for those living in HDB flats, with more given to those living in smaller flats. So this time, I will provide a once-off $100 household utilities credit to all Singaporean households, including those living in private property. Fifth, we will provide more help for businesses as well as specific segments. And the specific segments include self-employed persons who rely on the vehicles for their livelihood, as well as those who are impacted by the export ban on live chickens. For businesses in this higher energy cost environment, they will need to continue to restructure and become more energy efficient in order to remain competitive. And we will provide support to firms who need that extra lift to sustain their transformation efforts. So SMSG and SMS Kopo Kun will share the details of these measures later on as well. I know many Singaporeans are concerned about the immediate issues of rising prices and the cost of living. But please understand that the challenges before us are not just about inflation. They are also about adapting to major structural changes in our operating environment, rising temperatures and climate change, increased geopolitical contestation and tensions, and potentially moving into a more bifurcated and decoupled world. So we have to fundamentally restructure and transform ourselves for this new world, a world which is likely to be more uncertain, volatile, and even more dangerous than before. And that's why we have to accelerate, not slow down, our economic reforms. We have to keep on moving forward to restructure and transform ourselves. At the same time, it's also important that we move forward in a fiscally responsible and sustainable manner. And this will ensure that we are in a strong economic and fiscal position to deal with any future challenges ahead, and also to seize the opportunities in this new environment. On that note, let me end with a few words on how we are funding this new $1.5 billion package. We are able to do so without a further draw on our past reserves. And this is because we expect our fiscal outturn for fiscal year 2021 to improve compared to the estimates at budget 2022. We collected higher revenues due to the stronger than expected economic recovery last year, and we used less of the budget set aside for COVID-19 spending because the Omicron variant turned out to be less severe than anticipated. So we will not pass a supplementary budget at this point. We are still early in the financial year, and Parliament had just approved the budget for financial year 2022 just 3 months ago. Instead, the ministries will reprioritize within their existing budgets to fund this package. We are dealing with multiple crises at the same time: COVID-19, global economic slowdown, and inflation. But I trust in our collective ability to stand united and work together to tackle these challenges. We have done so in the past 2 years fighting COVID-19, and we have shown that we are stronger when we stand together. We have to brace ourselves for a bumpy ride ahead. The situation is highly fluid, and the government will continue to monitor it closely and adjust our measures and programs as necessary. We will be upfront in sharing with Singaporeans the challenges ahead and how we intend to go about tackling them. The bottom line is that we are all in this together, and I'm confident that we will get through this together as one united people. Let me just say a few words in Mandarin before I invite my colleagues to speak. 大家早上好，我知道最近大家都很关注物价上涨的问题。政府在今年的财政预算案推出了不少措施，减轻国人的生活负担。但是，随着全球的能源和粮食价格不断上升，新加坡也受到影响。我们必须做好准备，物价可能会长时间维持在高水平，这将对低收入家庭和工友带来更大的影响。所以，政府将推出额外的援助配套，主要帮助低收入人士和弱势群体。这包括为个人 和家庭提供现金援助和水电费回扣。这个配套也将继续推动企业和劳动队伍的转型，支持本地企业增加竞争力，并帮助较低薪员工提升技能和收入。政府会提供津贴，鼓励中小型企业采用节能设备，减少能源用量，从而减低费用。我们也帮助本地企业更好地应付现金转做的问题。这个配套总值15亿元，无需动用储备金。我希望这能帮助个人、家庭和企业减轻一些压力。政府会继续密切关注情况的发展，也随时准备好在有需要的时候为国人提供进一步的援助。就好像这2年来，我们风雨同舟，齐心协力对抗疫情。我相信，只要大家上下一心，团结一致，我们这次也一定可以一起克服这个难关。谢谢。
Thank you, DPM. We recognize that our businesses are facing higher operating costs and heightened cash flow concerns during this period. In addition, some businesses have only just started to recover from the effects of COVID-19. The government understands your concerns, and we will step in to cushion these near-term energy and labor cost increases. At the same time, we have to press on with enterprise and workforce transformation efforts, especially in the areas of energy efficiency and labor productivity. These are key to enhancing Singapore's economic competitiveness, which will in turn allow our workers to have better jobs and earn higher wages over time. And this is the best way to deal with the cost increases over the longer term. We'll therefore introduce a new energy efficiency grant for local SMEs in the food services, food manufacturing, and retail sectors. These SMEs have been more significantly affected by higher electricity prices. The new grant complements other energy efficiency initiatives, such as NEA's Energy Efficiency Fund, which supports businesses in the manufacturing sector, and BCA's Green Mark Incentive Scheme for existing buildings. The Energy Efficiency Grant will provide local SMEs with up to 70% support to adopt energy-efficient equipment in pre-approved categories with funding cap of $30,000 per company. This way, firms can improve their energy efficiency levels, reduce energy consumption, and also reduce their cost of doing business. Next, we will enhance our financing schemes to support local enterprises facing cash flow constraints. We will enhance the Enterprise Financing Scheme trade loan by increasing the maximum loan quantum from $5 million to $10 million from 1st July 2022 to 31st March 2023. And we will also maintain the enhanced government risk share of 70%. From now till 30th September 2022, firms can tap on the Temporary Bridging Loan Program, or TBLP, for their working capital needs. When the TBLP expires, we will enhance the Enterprise Financing Scheme SMB Working Capital Loan by increasing the maximum loan quantum from $300,000 to $500,000 from 1st October 2022 to 31st March 2023. We will also enhance the Progressive Wage Credit Scheme by increasing government's co-funding share of eligible wage increases in 2022 from 50% to 75% for workers earning up to $2,500 per month, and from 30% to 45% for workers earning between $2,500 and $3,000 per month. And this will reduce the cost impact on employers when they hire and when they pay lower wage workers higher salaries. And that is the outcome that we want to see, to uplift our low wage workers. We also want to help businesses to cushion some of the labor cost increases while continuing with our tripartite efforts to improve labor productivity and skills upgrading. Next, let me talk about the support for self-employed persons who are affected by higher fuel costs. Many self-employed persons in the transport sector have been affected by the increase in fuel price. As we know, palm prices have gone up 30 to 40% over the past 6 months. Taxi and private hire car operators have introduced temporary fare adjustments to supplement the incomes of our drivers in the point-to-point sector. Many operators offer further support, such as rental rebates and discounted fuel. The government will also do our part to help. We will provide a one-off relief of $150 to each eligible taxi main hirer and private hire car driver. For our self-employed combi bus and limousine drivers, as well as delivery drivers and riders, we have worked with the labour movement to extend further assistance to them through NTUC. And we're able to do this because of the close partnership we have built over the years with NTUC under the leadership of Secretary General Brother Ng Chee Meng and his team. On behalf of the government, I would like to thank our sisters and brothers from NTUC for their strong support and care for our workers. NTUC will share more details on the assistance package when ready. Let me conclude by reinforcing what DPM mentioned earlier, that while we provide targeted and immediate relief to help households, workers, and businesses cope with near-term cost increases, we must not lose momentum on our enterprise and workforce transformation efforts. And these are important to Singapore's longer-term economic competitiveness to overcome our constraints on land, labor, and carbon, and to give our people and our workers better jobs, higher wages, and a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you, DPM. As a globally connected economy with a lack of natural resources, Singapore imports more than 90% of our food supplies. So as such, we are vulnerable to external shocks and supply disruptions, which could happen unexpectedly and come from any source. Some of these reasons could well be climate change impacting crop produce, could be global zoonotic outbreaks affecting farmed animals, or even right now, for example, COVID-19, global pandemic issues causing supply chain disruptions. Certainly, other things like geopolitical instability, as well as foreign government policy changes, can have impact on our food supplies as well. Now, this is a global trend that affects many other countries, not just Singapore. Singapore has, in fact, encountered some of these disruptions in the past, and we must expect that some of these disruptions can happen from time to time. To mitigate the impact of some of these food supply disruptions, Singapore adopts a multi-pronged strategy to strengthen our food security, and this includes encouraging more local produce to act as a buffer and also to diversify our food import sources. In fact, we import from more than 170 countries and regions, avoiding excessive concentration of any particular food type from any particular source. Import diversification actually mitigates the impact of disruptions from any single source and gives room for our importers to look for alternative sources of supply and thereby strengthening our food security. You will have known that we've been pushing the 30 by 30 vision, and this will help to step up efforts to reduce our reliance on foreign imports by scaling up our local production, helping our local farms to act as a critical buffer for us. The government is also aware that arising from the recent events, such as the Malaysian chicken export ban, some sectors in particular have been badly hit. We are monitoring this situation very closely. For example, chicken slaughterhouses whose employees' livelihoods depend on the slaughtering of live chickens have been directly impacted by Malaysia's ban on chicken exports. Now, as the main activity for these chicken slaughterhouses is to slaughter live chickens, most of the chicken slaughterhouses have had to put their slaughtering staff on leave. So to help preserve this industry capability amid the ban, the government will provide 1 month of foreign worker levy waiver for the chicken slaughterhouses that are affected by Malaysia's chicken export ban. The Singapore Food Authority, SFA, will issue a circular with more information to these affected chicken slaughterhouses. While the government continues to facilitate the opening of new sources for food imports, we want to really encourage our industry and the companies to build their resilience into their food supply networks by implementing suitable business continuity plans, such as diversifying and maintaining warm links with alternate sources of supply. This could in turn then protect their businesses from any unexpected supply shocks so they can pivot much more quickly. Government recognizes that some of our hawkers and that are selling chicken products and also market stallholders who are selling poultry have been affected by the ban on chicken exports from Malaysia. So we've been working quite closely with the industry partners and trade associations to quickly ramp up alternative supplies of chicken. We have also linked up the affected stallholders and hawkers with the Meat Traders Association to switch to frozen or thawed chicken, or thawed frozen chicken as alternatives. And in fact, many have done so and shown great resilience amidst this disruption. The majority of actually poultry market stalls and chicken rice stalls have remained open and have been able to diversify and pivot to sell or use thawed frozen chicken, fresh kampong chicken, or black chicken. NEA has also received some appeals from those who continues to face challenges in pivoting and is actively assisting these stallholders. The government will continue to monitor the situation closely, paying full attention to the supply disruption and stand ready to provide further support if needed. But we want to urge all stallholders and businesses to adapt and to support one another in finding new sources, new channels, and think about new business models. So let me conclude by reassuring stallholders who continue to face financial difficulties that they can tap on existing schemes such as ComCare or the COVID-19 recovery grant. They may also approach NEA or the SSO for assistance if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DPM Wong and SMSs. Now we'll open the Q&A session. Gentle reminder again, please raise your hand when you want to ask a question.
Thank you. Keyang from Zaobao here. I refer to the recent coffee shop transactions which saw the price skyrocket, particularly in Yishun and Tampines, and there's a lot of anxiety on the ground that the high transaction costs will lead to higher rental and then more expensive food for these people who do not have access to a hawker center nearby. So is the government going to consider taking intervention measures to prevent the food prices from going up further? Thank you.
Thank you. We understand the concerns that Singaporeans have about rising prices, especially when it comes to food. And these recent transactions, I think, can cause some anxieties on the ground. The best way for us to address and tackle this is to ensure that in all our housing estates, there are affordable food options. And that means hawker centers are available, as well as coffee shops that could be run by social enterprises, like NTUC Food Fair, for example. So that's our key lever to continue with our building program for hawker centers to ensure that affordable food options remain available to all Singaporeans. And that will also put some competitive pressure in the market when it comes to some of these commercial transactions. At the same time, besides dealing with the supply situation, we will, as we have been doing in the budget and in this package, continue to help Singaporeans with their cost of living. And so to provide, whether it's CDC vouchers or GST vouchers, as we are doing in this package, to ensure that everyone will be helped, but especially the lower income groups and vulnerable groups will get more help.
Hi, Ministers. I'm Michelle from CNA. I'd like to ask about the implementation of GST, whether or not we'll consider delaying that further. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I know because of the concerns about cost of living, Singaporeans are worrying that the GST will add to the concerns about rising inflation and cost of living. But in fact, we've had an extensive debate on this recently in the budget. I've explained why the GST increase is necessary. Our spending needs are rising very sharply, especially because of an aging population and healthcare spending. We have looked at all the different possibilities for raising We have looked at the different possibilities for raising revenue, and we have made various revenue moves in the budget, including on personal income tax, property tax, and luxury car taxes. But they are still not enough, and that's why we have to raise the GST. But recognizing the uncertainties, recognizing the difficult economic environment, I had decided to push back the GST to as late as possible and to stagger the increase in 2 steps, and importantly, to put in place a very generous offset package. Essentially, for the majority of Singaporean households, they will not feel the impact of the GST increase for at least 5 years. For the lower income groups, they will not feel the impact for 10 years. So those were all explained and set aside as part of the budget measures. And I go back to the points I mentioned earlier in my remarks, which is I hope everyone understands the challenges that we have to deal with going forward are not just cost of living and inflation. We have to deal more fundamentally with a very different operating environment. Different sorts of challenges, including climate change, more bifurcated world externally and within Singapore, domestic challenges too, including our rapidly aging population. And to prepare Singapore well for these challenges, we have to press ahead with our economic reforms. We cannot afford to slow down. And that includes ensuring that we have a strong and sustainable fiscal position going forward, because that will enable us to deal with a more uncertain future, to deal with any challenges that we may face in the future, and also to seize new opportunities. And that's why we have to continue with our economic reforms while doing whatever we can to help the Singaporeans who are impacted by the cost of living issues, especially the lower income and more vulnerable groups.
Thank you. Question from here, please.
Yeah, thanks for the briefing. I just want to
Can you
press
please
on
introduce
from
yourself first?
Yeah, sorry, I'm Justin from Today. Just want to ask an additional question with the GST increase also. I understand that the increased timeline was mentioned. I mean, the GST increase timeline was mentioned in the budget this year, and just wondering whether or not the ministry will be sticking with this timeline despite the inflationary pressures and with the outlook. And was the pushback of the timeline being considered? Yeah.
I think that's exactly the same question. I've answered it. I don't think I have any more to add. As I said, we have already done whatever we can in planning for the revenue needs for the future, and we have to do so in a responsible and sustainable manner. This is not just tackling an inflation issue that is right now happening to Singapore. The challenges we face are longer term. We do not know how prolonged or deep these challenges will be, and we will be better positioned if we enter into this new environment with a strong economic and fiscal position.
Thank you. Question over there, please, SG.
Hi, I'm UNC from the Straits Times. My question is about inflation and global recession. So a lot of governments fighting inflation, and analysts are saying that it could plunge the world into global recession. So, how will it affect us if that happens? And is there any danger of that happening here? And if that's the case, how long do we expect this situation to last? And will it affect our plans for GST if indeed the world plunges into global recession?
Well, the GST question has already been answered, but let's take the issue of the broader environment. There are indeed more downside risk to the global economy as well as the global inflation outlook. But for now, the Singapore economy is still growing. I think the forecast will be updated by MTI in due course, but we still expect healthy growth this year. And there is considerable momentum behind the economy because we have just opened up our borders, we have relaxed our COVID-19 measures, and many economic activities are, continuing to do well. On inflation, the outlook, as I said, is, we do expect prices to continue to remain elevated for some time. But unlike central banks in many developed countries who have been behind the curve in tackling inflation, the MAS has been vigilant and has made moves in a very timely manner. Since October, MAS has already made 3 moves on inflation. And we are still going through the effects of the monetary tightening in slowing down the momentum of price increases in our economy. So MAS on inflation will continue to stay vigilant to price increases globally and within Singapore, and they will stand ready to respond to ensure price stability over the medium term. Overall, therefore, we have to recognize that this continues to be a very fluid situation. The economy is still growing for now, but inflation is rising. We are tackling it through monetary policy, and we are doing whatever we can to help groups that are impacted by inflation, especially the lower income and more vulnerable segments who will feel or who will bear a greater burden when prices rise. And that is the correct approach. But the situation is fluid, it's dynamic. We'll have to see what happens to the global economy next year, whether there is a recession and how severe the recession will be and how it impacts Singapore. So this is something we will continue to monitor very closely, as I mentioned, and we will adjust our programs and measures as needed according to this dynamic situation.
Question over here, please.
Hi, Boon Leong from Zaobao. Following on the questions on inflation, there's been concerns about rising interest rate, particularly mortgage rate, which have been rising, and also concern about rising property prices. And so, although we have rolled out the cooling measures last year, but it seems that it's not been having great impact. The property price is still rising. So, are the government looking at the situations, and how is the household debt situations, Singapore household debt situations?
Thank you. We have always said that we monitor the property market very closely with a view to ensuring a stable and sustainable property market. And when we look at property price changes, it's not just looking at prices alone, it's looking at prices compared with economic fundamentals. So it's looking at both price changes as well as income changes in Singapore and making sure that the property market moves in line with economic fundamentals. So I wouldn't make the conclusion that the cooling measures have had no effect. All right? We have done one round, and we will continue to monitor the market closely. And as I said, the situation is dynamic, and including for property market measures, we will see as and when necessary whether or not further adjustments are necessary in line with our approach, which is to ensure a stable and sustainable property market. You talked about property demand being still very high, but at the same time, indeed, you have highlighted the concern that interest rates are rising. So that is a factor that may help to dampen demand, in fact. And will it cause, of course, concerns the other way, which is that households may be facing too much of a leverage in their balance sheets, and then may have increased costs and burdens because of rising interest rates, especially with regard to household mortgages and their loans. Well, that's also something that we have been monitoring very closely. Fortunately for Singapore, again, this is not something new because we have already put in place safeguards and prudential measures, especially when it comes to borrowing for home mortgages. Right? There's a loan-to-value limit which MAS regulates, and our household balance sheets are not overly stretched at this time. So I think they will be able to withstand the impact of higher interest rates, but we will continue to monitor this closely too.
DPM Puat from Berita Harian. I want to ask about the petrol price. Is there any effort to tackle this problem, the increasing petrol price in Singapore?
Yeah, we understand also the issue with petrol prices, whether it's energy prices as a whole globally have gone up, are likely to remain elevated, as I mentioned just now, and this filters into Singapore by way of petrol prices, fuel prices, as well as electricity prices. Where fuel prices are concerned, in fact, we are trying to accelerate our shift towards cleaner vehicles, more energy efficient vehicles. And in a way, this is a timely opportunity for us to do so. So we will try our best to accelerate that shift to cleaner, more energy efficient vehicles, and therefore reduce our reliance on fuel. But we know that there are segments who are impacted more badly this time, and that's why in this package we are providing more help for the specific segments, especially people, self-employed persons who rely on their vehicles for livelihoods. And as SMSG just said just now, we are providing more help to them, recognizing the specific difficulties that they face.
Question from here, please, at the front.
Yep. Hi, Kang Wei from Channel 8 here. Firstly, if we could get a Mandarin soundbite from DPM on, the stand of whether to delay GST in the coming next 2 years. And for my question, it would be on the household utilities credit, because I think just now you mentioned that the whole support package will be focused on lower income and vulnerable groups. I'm just wondering, what are the considerations behind of not implementing these through a tiered system based on property size, but rather why are we giving $100 across all households? Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, we are doing a tiered system because, as I mentioned just now, in the budget, we have already given a fair amount of U-Save rebates to HDB properties, and the ones living in smaller properties are getting more U-Save rebates. But all this while, for quite some time now, we have not had given out U-Save rebates to those living in private properties. And that's why with this $100 rebate, once-off rebate for all households, including those living in private property, effectively we are having a tiered system, which means those living in private property will get a 1-month rebate. But if, for example, you are living in a 3-room or 4-room HDB flat, you will get many more months of rebates effectively if you count all of the rebates that have been given in the budget. For those living in 3-room flat, for example, I think you'll get something like close to 7 months of utilities rebates. And for those living in 4-room flat, you will get more than 5 months of utilities rebates. So we are indeed operating on a tiered system. On the Mandarin soundbite, I think we can do it later, unless one of my colleagues wants to help me do it, because it's not going to be possible for me to switch and toggle. I don't have a magic teacup now.
Do it later, DPM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, DPM SMSs. Can we have the next question from ST again before we move to Zaobao?
Sorry, I had one follow-up question to your answer just now about the global recession. You mentioned that the situation is dynamic, and we will look at whether there's a global recession next year and how severe it might be, how it will affect Singapore, and we will adjust our programs and measures as needed. Did you also mean, when you said programs and measures, did you also mean the GST support package? And then my second question is, how will a COVID resurgence affect all this? Like, do you foresee that there might be a COVID resurgence?
Well, COVID remains a risk, certainly, for the global economy as well as for Singapore. In fact, I said today is not an MTF conference, but today's numbers later on will show that it is rising, partly because of the BA4 Omicron subvariant. And we will probably put out more information either today or tomorrow to explain what's happening on the COVID front. This is just with Omicron. I mean, we still don't know beyond Omicron how the virus might mutate and whether there will be a more dangerous variant coming as we approach the winter. So certainly we are still keeping our eye very closely on the COVID situation. And if it were to happen, if something were to, if the trajectory were to take a turn for the worse, certainly it will compound the issues with already the Ukraine war, the supply chain disruptions, all of it coming together. And that's why I mentioned just now that the downside risks are growing, both for the economy and for inflation. At this stage, we won't know exactly how severe the slowdown will be. It may well be that we are in a more benign situation where we are dealing with inflation, higher prices, more elevated prices, but overall, the global economy is still able to grow despite some slowing down. And in the same way, Singapore's economy might still continue to grow, not just this year, but next year as well. If that's the case, then it's a very different situation. Our economy is growing, labor market remains tight, unemployment rates remain very low, then we are in a very different situation from a severe recession scenario. But if we are in a severe recession scenario, that means we are talking about negative growth in the economy, unemployment rates going up, well above what we are now, maybe back to where we saw in 2020. Well, that's a very different scenario. And of course, we don't rule these things out, but if indeed we are in such a scenario, then we'll have to think through all the different drawer plans to help Singapore tide through such a global recession and a local domestic recession as well. And whenever we do these things, we will of course look at all the different options before us, what we should do, but as I said just now, we also deal with these situations with the longer term perspective in mind, not just dealing with the immediate situation. If there is an immediate emergency scenario, then we will have fiscal resources available, including through our reserves, to help tide through such an national emergency scenario. But whenever we do make any of these measures, we have to bear in mind the importance of doing things in a responsible and sustainable manner for the medium to longer term. And that's why I said just now, all the revenue measures, including GST changes that we make, have to take that perspective.
DPM, can I add something? Yeah. Just wanted to add on 2 points. The first is that, even though we are facing a lot of challenges in the global economy, there are also pockets of opportunities. And the key really is how we as a country, we as an economy, we are able to differentiate ourselves from the competition. So I think this is something very key. We have been able to diversify our economy over the years, and that has helped us because different sectors are impacted differently during the pandemic. Manufacturing, for example, has been doing well. Some of the sectors were not doing so well previously, now slowly recovering. But having this diversified economy actually helps us to be able to tide through the ups and downs. But going forward, I think there are also some very important areas that we want to focus on. And I would say no regrets move, because these are ways to further differentiate ourselves from the competition, build stronger enterprise and workforce capabilities through economic restructuring and transformation, through upskilling and lifelong learning. And I think very importantly also working both at the sectorial level, industry by industry, and also at the company level, using our strong foundations, our tripartite partnership together with NTUC and the employers. I think this is something which is a strength that Singapore has over the competition. And if we can do this well, actually we will make good use of the crisis, differentiate ourselves, attract more investments, create more opportunities, generate more jobs, and position Singapore stronger for the future.
Thank you. Next question, Cao Bao Boon Leong. I believe you have a question.
Hi, it's me again, sorry. I'd like to ask about this private hire cars, the drivers one-off relief, because the charges for these private hire cars like Grab and Gojek has increased quite a lot recently due to various reasons. And then I understand that we have given a one-off relief one-off charges for support for them. So how to justify to give another relief for them this time round?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your question. You are right that we have been providing support throughout the pandemic for taxi drivers, for private hire drivers, because they have been badly affected by the pandemic. This time round, this is a one-off relief, $150 per driver. Really is to help to cushion some of the cost impact that they face with higher fuel costs. So the purpose is a little bit different from what we did previously, but this is really a one-off relief to help them to be able to cushion some of the cost increases. Because when they drive, they do face the cost increases. And I think this is one way of helping them. They are also providing an important service, this point-to-point transport, and we want to be able to help our drivers to be able to cope with the cost increases due to fuel price rise. Yeah.
Do we have other questions, please? BT Radio, CNA Digital. Okay, we have no other questions. Do we have closing remarks from DPM?
Thank you. We've given an update on what our overall economic and inflation outlook might be. There are uncertainties ahead, but as I mentioned just now, this year, we still expect the economy to grow. Inflation, we think prices will remain high for some time, in line with global prices. There will be upward pressure, for example, on energy prices, and it will likely increase further before it gets better globally and similarly in Singapore. And precisely because of all of these concerns, we are rolling out this additional package to help Singaporeans. We are doing so and designing the package carefully so that the package does not in itself spark more inflation in Singapore, which can easily happen because you give more stimulus, that stimulus creates more inflationary pressures. And that's why the package is weighted toward helping the lower income and more vulnerable segments in our society who will bear the higher brunt of increased prices in our society. But overall, I think while there are challenges ahead, while there are dark clouds over the horizon, lots of risk in the near term and also in the medium term, I think we should continue to draw confidence in the fact that Singapore is tackling these challenges and moving forward from a position of strength, certainly compared to many other countries around the world. Our economy is still doing well. We have moved earlier than most central banks when it comes to tackling inflation and monetary policy. And we have the fiscal resources to help Singaporeans tide through the higher prices as well as any potential crisis that may emerge down the road. And that is why I go back to my earlier point that it is important for us to keep an eye on the medium and longer term in whatever we do. We have to make sure that we are not only dealing with the here and now and the immediate issues of cost of living and inflation, but we must accelerate our momentum for reforms and ensure Singapore emerges from this crisis with a stronger economic and fiscal position. And this is what will enable us to deal with any uncertainties, any challenges, because we do not know how prolonged or how deep the challenges will be in the future. And it's much better that we prepare ahead of time, make sure that we are in a strong and sound position to deal with any of these challenges, but also to be able to seize the many opportunities, the new opportunities that may emerge in the future, as SMSG said just now. And at the heart of it all, I hope we can also draw confidence from the journey that we have been through in the last 2 years fighting the pandemic. We have shown that so long as we stay united, stay together, work together, we will be able to overcome any challenges ahead. And with that kind of mindset and attitude, I am confident that we will get through this crisis or any other crisis that we may face in the future.